friction is something I would understand a little better than fiction or non-fiction, but I will try. I'm doing this because Rashmi is a dear friend, and I will try to get her to talk about some of the facets of her that I know, which is what I find most fascinating about her. I want to tell you a little story. I don't know if anybody in the audience is an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad. Today, everybody gets paid a hell of a lot, but my genre, an IIMA alumni meet was something that everybody looked forward to. Yes, you got a chance to meet friends, but more importantly, there was always some noble corporate who would sponsor, and therefore alcohol was on the house. So a lot of us would go, most certainly, for an alumni get-together. And there was one such at President Hotel on the terrace which juts out on the first floor. There was a very important speaker who was a chairman of a big multinational. A few of us were right at the back, proximity to the bar. And I guess our volumes just got a little higher that everybody heard us. So there was a lady who came up and literally shooed us away and said, please leave. So I asked my friend, Abhijit Sanyal, who's she? And he looked at me as if I didn't recognize Amitabh Bachchan. And he said, that's Rashmi Bansal. Right? So Rashmi Bansal was a name that all of us knew. Unlike Amitabh Bachchan, who comes on screen, Rashmi Bansal is just a name. So who's John Galt is a parallel question, one could say. So that was my first, and she's going to be very nice today and say she doesn't remember any of this incident. We were both part of IIMA Alumni Association. So we've done our bits of trekking to the institute, trying to convince the institute that alumni are important. We didn't quite succeed. We've done our treks to corporates with our begging bowls, trying to tell them that supporting IIMA is important. We didn't get much success. We've done our treks to chat with summer interns and make them feel good. The only tip I would give any of you is if you travel with Rashmi in a cab, quietly sit in front, because she will sit, then her bag will sit, and then her several miscellaneous things will sit. So it's just sit in the front. That's the only thing I would say. Rashmi, thank you for letting me do this. I don't know why you picked me, but you picked me. I want to get back to maybe the lady spoke ahead. And it's not just about the fact that it's a stressful process to get it. It's not just about the fact that it's more stressful living there. It's also about the fact that everybody around in IIM Ahmedabad is there for a very specific purpose, get a great job and run. And you went there?
I started writing when I was about 17 years old, and I started freelancing for various newspapers and magazines in Bombay. At that time, we didn't have email, so what you had to really do was type out your article and put it in a envelope along with a self-addressed, self-stamped envelope, and send it to the editor and hope that it might get published. I did that. I typed out my articles and I would send them to the editor of Times of India, hoping they would get published. There used to be a column called Middle Column, which some of you might remember. So it was really my dream to get published in that space. So I sent my article, and about 1 week later, I got the envelope back, self-addressed, self-stamped envelope with the slip saying the editor regrets he cannot publish article due to lack of space. So I thought, okay, let me try again. And the next week, I typed out another article, sent another letter to the editor of the Times of India, and exactly 1 week later, I got the same envelope back. After this happened 3 or 4 times, I got really angry and I said, I have to get published and I'll keep trying until I get published. And so I kept sending articles and articles until one fine day I opened the newspaper and I found that they had published my middle, in the Times of India. And later on, I got 50 rupees or something for this. But I really think that's where my writing career maybe started, in terms of being a professional writer. And I knew I wanted to be a writer. I started, in fact, working with the independent newspaper when I was still in college. I would go there after my college got over at 2 o'clock. I would go there from about 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I would go and work there. In fact, I was given the lowliest job possible, which was to handle the letters column again. In those days, again, there was no email, so the editor would, a bag full of letters would come, and you had to pick out the best letter and, print it in that space. And then they would let me do a few articles also. Sometimes they would send me to do a story, or sometimes I would go with ideas and say, I want to write about this. So I really wanted to be a journalist. That's what I decided I want to be. But because of the kind of family background I was from, my father is a scientist, all the people whom I grew up with, they're already gone and become engineers or doctors or whatever. They were all busy studying for those more useful degrees. I had already dropped out of that and joined a Bachelor of Arts, which made me a very stupid person. So I had told my father that, look, I'll try for an MBA. I fill the form. And by the time I knew I wanted to be a journalist, I also had this CAT exam to give. I thought I'll just give the exam. I didn't really go with the intention of, like reaching this great institute. But for some reason, I qualified in the exam. I qualified in the interview. And then I thought that, look, if I don't go to IIM, I'll probably regret it for the rest of my life. If I'm ever not successful or I'm like in a low point, I'll think, oh, I should have done this. So let me just go and have that experience. So I really went with this kind of a very open-ended idea that, look, I'm going for an experience. I want to live in a hostel. I've never stayed away from home. My parents are a real pain right now. So let me just have this experience. So I never went thinking about what kind of a job I'm going to get, what kind of career I'm going to have. I just thought this is 2 years of my life. I get to, have a new experience. And that's how I treated those 2 years too.
Now, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight wisdom, was it worth it?
Yeah, I mean, in my second book, Connect the Dots, right in the beginning, I mentioned this whole idea of what is Connect the Dots, which is, of course, taken from Steve Jobs' speech at Stanford University, which is that when you look back at your life, then you can see how it all makes sense, how all the dots connect and create a picture. And while I was studying at IIM Ahmedabad, I was pretty confused about why I'm there, because in the second term, I thought I might even fail and have to drop out of the course, which would have been really horrible because I had always been a school topper and so on. But I found it very difficult to cope up with a lot of the subjects, and I didn't have much interest either. So I asked God, like, why have you sent me here? Actually, I had a pretty good offer to join Times of India. I mean, why did I do this kind of, different thing, which I'm probably not cut out for? But many years later, when I went back for my 15th year union, and this was just about a few months after the book Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish came out. And at that time, I was felicitated, because that book, it came out and it sold 50,000 copies in just about 4 months. So the dean felicitated me, and I realized that, probably I'm here, standing here today. I've written this best-selling book because all the dots have connected up. I did go for the education. I got the MBA training, grounding, so I can understand business better. I was able to, start a company of my own and go through that experience also. And at the end of it, I was able to write a book which is about business, but it's also a book which is not dry and boring like most of the business books which we are, prescribed in an IIM. So it's got the human element too, because at heart I'm a writer. So I understand business, I know how to write, so I can write well about business. So that's how it all connected up for me. And I have no regrets that, I did that course, although I never wanted to join a corporate job. But I don't think that you have to look at education like, today people are very, very focused. They know at the moment they enter that this is what I want at the end of my 2 years. I don't think that that's the right way to look at education. Education is an investment in growing yourself, your perspective, your personality, your, entire worldview. My way was to use it in this way. It is not the usual way, but it worked for me.
I hope that partly addresses the question. IIMA is exceptionally proud of the fact that Rashmi Bansal is an alumnus of IIMA, and one of those lucky guys. My batchmate is Harsha Bogle. I do a lot of work with Rashmi Bansal. But these are the stars that the Institute recognizes much after they all pass out. I want to come back to, pardon the MBA jargon, but you seem to have chosen a nice sweet spot, a white space called youth. And you've stayed focused on youth for 20 years or more, whether it's counseling them on career choices, whether it's counseling them on values, whether it's counseling them or inspiring them with stories. But you're always talking to the youth. Help everyone understand how did you establish that this is my calling and this is where I should focus? Tell us the stories behind it and how come you've so steadfastly stuck with it?
You know, I was one of the crazy people who would keep bugging the editor of Times of India before he published me. I think I collected about 40 rejection slips and then I got my first article published. But I just thought that probably everybody is not going to do that. If I look around, I would see that there is no youth magazine. So it was my dream at that time when I was still a college student, that why can't there be a youth magazine, which is really a youth magazine, not like something run by very old people, but something which reflects the language and the spirit and the, whole fun of being young. It was like maybe 2-3 years later when I actually worked with the Times of India. After I graduated, I went back to Times and I worked there as a brand manager, which was a very unique and weird job created for me where I could write and I could also be a manager, which didn't exist earlier because you had either you're a journalist or you're a manager. You can't do both. And I got the opportunity to start a youth page called Indie in the Independent newspaper, which I said is going to be off for and by the youth. And it became very popular. At that point, I thought, well, why can't we have we can really have a magazine. And a few of us got together. We put in about 50,000 rupees, which I had saved up to take a trip to Europe on Eurail. But I thought that it's more important to start a youth magazine when I'm still young, because I was about 24 years old at that time. I thought if I wait another 5 years, 10 years, I myself will be over the hill and it will be of no use. And I honestly feel that, youth, I would define youth a little more concisely as, the college age population. That's the one time in your life when every door of the universe is open to you. You have the whole world in front of you. You just, you have a lot of energy, you have a lot of optimism, you have a whole future. Nothing is tying you down. At that time, if you can really find yourself, you can be anything you want to be. And I wanted to really be that platform where people could discover that about themselves. If you're a creative person, you get a chance to, for the very first time, get published. Most people will not try again and again. They will just give up. So that was the kind of objective I had. I like being with young people because of this reason, because they have this energy and optimism, The older you get, more tied down you get with what society expects of you, what responsibilities you have, the kind of clothes you wear change, the kind of, your routine in life changes. So I felt that, this is the space in which I enjoy being, and that's what I think it just happened naturally. I don't know if I really thought out any strategy. I thought there's a gap in the market. I like this space. There's something that I can do here, I can contribute here, and I can create something which can make a difference.
There is a one side to Rashmi, which I call the agony aunt, right? Everybody writes in telling them their life problems, right? So not exactly of the Oprah Winfrey mold. So there was one particular one, which I remember. Somebody wrote to her and said, listen, I've got a high-class problem. I've got admission to both IIT and IISc, Indian Institute of Science. And thereafter, I want to do my MBA. I'm clear about that. I'm confused, so which one should I choose? One would have expected somebody to say that, look at yourself, what are your deep interests, this, that. And here is Rashmi, 20 years past the time that she thought of all of these things. The admirable part is how she remains youthful even today. Her response was, dude, your expectation of life is clear. You want a good life. So don't waste your time with IISc. IIT, IIM works. Now, I don't think very many people, a lot of us may want to say it, but I don't think we have the gumption or the chutzpah to actually go and say it. And you said it. What I want to ask, what I want you to talk about is these thoughts that you're talking about, Times of India, go back to early 90s. And you've stayed that way, almost like a Bollywood actress who stays perennially 21. How have you managed that?
I don't know, that's being very kind. I like to be in touch with young people. I visit 100 and maybe 150 campuses a year. I interact with them. I'm always open to them. They keep writing into me. I try to help as many people as possible. I think, unfortunately, things have not moved very far from what it was 20 years ago. Even today, young people are still as confused about their career as they used to be. I had thought that, yeah, in 20 years, so much is going to change. But even today, people who are in class 10, who are in class 12, most of them are grappling with the same issue that, oh, my parents want me to do engineering or medicine or CA, and I don't want to do those things. And even though we say that, yeah, there are so many careers open, most people don't really believe it. They really think that there are only these 3 or 4 careers available. So people are as confused as ever. And our family structure is a positive thing, but it's also one of the things which holds people back from really exploring themselves and finding their true potential. Many times people write to me with these questions, though they know the answer already. They just want someone who's just going to maybe, validate them. And I think I can only tell people one thing, that you have to find what you're really passionate about in your life and you have to pursue it, right? I mean, there are 2 formulas actually. Either can work for you. One is that you find what you love, right? You find what you love, which is what I did. I realized that, yeah, I love to write. And I just focused on that and I created my life out of it. But the other way you could do it is that you love what you do, Like I always explain it like in India, we have both love marriages and arranged marriages. So sometimes you meet a person, fall in love, and then you marry them. And other ways to maybe find somebody, you find somebody through other means, your parents introduce you, but you marry them and then you fall in love too. So there is a lot of merit to throwing yourself into whatever you do. Either you discover that this is my really special talent, aptitude, skill, or interest in life, and you accept that it's not what everyone is doing, but you believe in it and you pursue it, right? Or you take the more, normal path, like you go in for a management career, engineering career, whatever career, but then you throw yourself into that. And you give everything to that. My father is a scientist. He has been working in a very esoteric field for last 50 years. Like he is an X-ray astronomer. He studies cosmic rays and gamma rays which come onto the Earth from distant planets. This is not like a very usual profession which people take up. Okay, and he probably joined this profession as a job because as a BSc graduate, to get a job in Tata Institute of Fundamental Research was a very big thing. Okay, 50 years ago. But once he took it, he made it his whole life. I think that what I'm trying to convey through whatever I write is that you have to be passionate about what you do. There are people who start companies based on something that they're very passionate about, like, R. Sriram, he started a chain of bookstores called Crossword because he loved books. He was very clear about that I'm doing this because I only want to start a bookstore. It's not that I surveyed all the industries and this is the most profitable industry. Maybe it was a stupid decision also because it was very difficult to actually make it work, but he believed in that. But there are other people also who don't do it that way, They actually find something that seems to have a potential, there's a gap in the market or whatever it is, like they do it logically, but then they throw themselves into it. They say, okay, just become the best at this particular niche that I've chosen. And that's how they, create that excellence or that unique proposition for their company and service, whatever it is that they do.
Some of us get into trouble. I mean, you open your mouth, not to put your foot in, but you open your mouth to change the foot. But Rashmi's chutzpah has its own downside, right? The other day, for example, she tweeted, I don't know about where you should join, but don't join any university which is advertising on televisions. And therefore, she wrote about a ponytailed celebrity, right? and it got her into serious trouble. I thought, I do risk management for a day job. So tell me how you handle this. If you would bear with this few minutes, it's an amazing story. How it started and the different forms it took. It will tell you about, and this is an individual with no quote unquote infrastructure support. It's not like somebody said something about Shah Rukh Khan and a battalion of people are there to defend him. This is the classic one woman, full stop. Tell us.
I think you're making me sound like Rani of Jhansi or something. It's not like that. See, as a magazine, I had we stand for certain principles and values. One is that to inform our readers about what is the truth. We had many different things that we did. One of the main things we were known for is humor. I mean, our cover of the magazine was always, very crazy. It had a cartoon, but one of the other things that we did was we told people exactly what others won't tell them about careers and about colleges. And one college which we kept getting a lot of inquiries about, it's called IIPM. And they used to put full-page advertisements in various newspapers. So a lot of students would ask us, is this, I mean, they had a tagline called Dare to Dream Beyond IIMs. So people would constantly ask us, is it as good as an IIM? And we tried to answer this question in a very factual manner by conducting an investigation of, which over 3 months, where we took their own advertisement and we just tested the claims of the advertisement. And we actually took trouble to do it in the way any large newspaper or magazine would do. Like, as journalism requires, we did ask them for their inputs also. We found that many of the claims were lacking. Like, for example, the placement claims were not, correct. And we got companies who actually, when we asked them, they said that, yes, it's true. I mean, we don't visit this campus for placement. So we just presented the facts to our readers. And the article was, in fact, called The Truth About IIPM Stall Claims. It was published in June of 2005. And I guess it was the first time such a thing was done, because prior to that, most of the newspapers were getting very big advertising revenue from this particular college. So they never wanted to actually, discuss these aspects about whether this is really a very good college or not. I still say people have the right to join any institution, right? But they should do it knowingly, not go there and find out later that it doesn't stand up to what it advertises. So we did publish this report, which did create a lot of controversy, because, people don't want to hear things about themselves which are not maybe favorable. Yeah, I mean, we are still fighting a case in Silchar in Assam, which has been filed by them because, large companies
The man is based in Gurgaon, correct? Or Noida, or somewhere there, somewhere around Delhi. She lives in Bombay, but the case is in Assam. And it's gone on for about 6 or 7 years.
I think if all these things are part and parcel of, of journalism. We have to, these are risks of this job and of this profession. So we accept it. I mean, you might ask, like, why should you fight this case? Why don't you just accept that what they say is true, or, But it doesn't work like that. You have to stand for what you believe in and what you know is true. Initially, of course, when such a case is filed, you get upset or you get worried, and then you realize that, okay, I mean, you know that what you've done is right and you've done it for a reason. You've done it for people. I mean, it's not that I gained anything personally from doing this. So you continue it, and there are judicial processes in our country which take a very long time, but ultimately they should result in the result that is
I can tell you this much. If the man walked in without batting an eyelid, Rashmi would say, dude, back off. That's Rashmi that I've known for 10, 15 years. Let's move on the subject of risk. You did a story about entrepreneurship coming out of Dharavi, poor little rich slum. For a number of us, you actually gave us the filtered account. I mean, in the stock market, which is where I've spent bulk of my life, we proudly call this digested research. So we don't do primary research. Some others do it, and they write reports and give us. So
We think we are superior, but you actually made it very easy for us to sit where we want to sit and read success stories and say, wow. But you actually went and discovered them. And it's not an easy place to navigate.
No, it's actually a very easy place to navigate. You can just walk in. Any one of us can walk in there, and they're really wonderful, friendly people. I'm sure there are many slums in the world where we cannot walk in. I mean, if we go to Brazil, we go to Africa, we go to many places, you're probably going to get mugged, or you're going to get, you're going to feel a bit scared. But I mean, I'm ashamed to say, but before the idea of writing this book came up, although I've lived in Bombay my whole life, I'd never gone inside Dharavi. I never felt the need to go. I didn't know anybody there, I had no work there. I said, why do I need to go there? And I just knew that, yeah, this is Asia's largest slum. We've been hearing that since, we're in school. So I didn't think that I have any place or need to be in such a place, area of Bombay. I think doing that book was a really wonderful experience, a very different experience for me, because it made me realize a lot of my own limitations in life, my own biases, my own shortcomings. I think mostly when we think of entrepreneurs, we always think of the big guys, the Fortune 500, ET 100 companies. Even as journalists, we're always looking for what's big and what's, remarkable in terms of size or in scale or name. But India is really built on the backbone of these thousands and millions of small people, small entrepreneurs who are running a small business, really for survival, because that's their livelihood and that's their, bread and butter. But they're doing amazing things. So, when we think of a special economic zone, we always think of a software company, one big tower with glass and steel. But this place called Dharavi is also a special economic zone, where you have maybe $650 million worth of goods being produced every year. I mean, it was a really eye-opening experience, and therefore I decided to write about it, although I knew that this book is not going to sell as much as, say, a book about IMMBAs who become entrepreneurs. But I thought that if I have developed some kind of an audience, people who say, okay, I'll buy a book written by Rashmi Bansal, then it is my duty to also give them new subjects and new ideas to think about. And so many people wrote to me later on and said that, now when we pass by a slum, when we pass by Dharavi, we think about it differently. We used to think about them as, oh, they are parasites on society, they shouldn't exist. We should, demolish this entire place, and it looks so ugly and it's an eyesore. And even I used to think like that, I think. Yes, I too thought that way, that why do these slums need to exist? Without these people, our life would not be what it is today. We're all woven together, in a very close-knit way. We don't realize that. I mean, even if you go and see the recycling operations of Dharavi, you just have to be amazed that in other countries, when they do some small reduction in the amount of some carbon emission, they say they're becoming eco-friendly. And here, we take each and everything that's produced and we take it back and try to recycle it again. We take the cardboard boxes, the oil tins, the wiring, everything. They try and strip it of its economic value so it can be reused. And it's also giving them employment. But I don't want to glamorize Dharavi either. I mean, you do feel horrible, about the fact that so many people are living like this. I felt guilty for a long time, and I would go back to my own house and think that my bedroom is bigger than people's houses. And all this, we all have maids and drivers who live in these areas, but I don't know, we don't really spend time with them, we don't go and sit in their house, we don't have food with them, so then we don't really, feel it so strongly. And I think we probably keep our distance for this reason, because if we were to become too close to them, we would find it really too difficult to live with. So that's why we have created a wall between ourselves and people who live in slums, so that they visit our homes, but we don't visit their homes. I mean, I'm just happy that quite a lot of people have read this book, because I really wasn't sure if anybody's going to read this book, but still I wanted to write it. And in fact, I spent more time on this book than I spent on any other book, because we had to go for 9 months and, keep visiting people and understanding what is Dharavi.
Thank you, sir.
So it was really a wonderful experience, and I had a co-author for this book, and who actually came up with the idea for the book, and also we had a photographer, and so it was really a team effort also. And I think without that, I wouldn't have also been able to do it, because after 2-3 months, I was thinking there's nothing here, you know. I mean, what am I going to make a book out of? But because we were 3 of us together, and you know, we did it as a team, and we kept digging until, you know, we found enough material which we thought was interesting enough for a book.
I don't know if any of you attended that book launch at Crossword. She actually had a couple of those people there, and they were so proud to come out there. One of them is now supplying designer shoes. The business is doing very well. So on stage was the person who supplies and the buyer, explaining that. So it was a great experience. It was very moving, and Rashmi, you're still lowballing it, but I think the way you created that digested piece was awesome. I want to stick on this thing about risks to the job. When you write Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish, right, and you cover 25 people, one of the concerns in a country like India with 24/7 media, any small issue can be blown out of proportion and called a scam, right? So somebody who you covered, before you could say Sri Ramajayam, there is a story about that person. Person's reputation is stained, tarnished, and he's part of your book. How do you handle those risks?
I'm not a corporate person, so never thought of it that way at all. I never really, you know, went into this project thinking that I'm, you know, doing it with any kind of risk. I thought of it as a learning opportunity for me and for anybody who read the book. And the original story of Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish is that the idea didn't come from me. I don't take credit for the idea. Idea came from the Center for Innovation, Entrepreneurship and Incubation at IIM Ahmedabad, CIIE, and specifically from Professor Rakesh Basant. So he had the idea that, you know, why don't we write a book which chronicles success stories of our graduates? And it was to be released at a conference, and 1,000 copies were to be released and just circulated within the IIM. And I just thought that, wow, like I'll get this opportunity to meet 25 people, and I'll get to hear their stories and learn from them. And that's the kind of mindset I went for this project with. We drew up a list of people whom we thought have achieved something interesting, significant. And the very first person I met, he was Rashesh Shah of Edelweiss. And he told me that, you know, Rashmi, you're doing a very important thing. I said, what is that? So he said, you know, there's a book called The Market Wizards. It was written 20 years ago. It was written by a trader, and he went to interview other traders. And this book, I still give it to the new people who join my company. It's a very important book because the person who wrote it understood the people he was writing about. And you're doing something similar because you've been an entrepreneur and you're coming to interview people like me. So, you know, that just set the tone for the entire book, the entire project. That, look, I'm going to meet people and I'm going to learn something from them, and I'm going to share it with other people. Whether these people succeed or fail, I don't know. I mean, life is a journey. Sometimes a company is on the top. Sometimes it may, you know, go a little below. Sometimes it may even fail. Sometimes it could be human error. It could be market forces. It could be... The purpose of the books is to basically learn from the lives of other people. Yes, we do want to feature always people who are, you know, ethical and stand for some values and principles. When I shortlist people for books, I always look for that. I look for people who don't necessarily have the biggest turnover or biggest, you know, capitalization and so on and so forth. I don't look just for the financial indicators. I do look for, you know, the basic values of the person, the reputation that person enjoys in the market, from their peers, from their, competitors, from their employees. And there are people whom I don't interview and I don't feature, although they look good on paper, because I feel that, you know, maybe to get where they have reached, they've had to compromise a great deal. In every business, possibly one does, I'm not saying that you can be 100% above board, but it has to be built on certain principles and values. If you've reached the top by really compromising on everything, people around you know that, and that's what they say about you. And it's not difficult for a journalist to come to know that. So I think that's the basis on which I look for people. I look for people who can inspire others, I mean, today in society, money has a lot of respect. Because, if a guy who's made money through a scam has a wedding and invites you, you will probably attend the wedding. That means, in a way, you're endorsing that man, that, okay, no matter how he created the money, if he's throwing a big, party at the Taj, I am still going to attend it. So, to that extent, yes, we do, place money at that level. But I'm sure we don't actually want our children to become like this man. We don't want, I don't want to write books which are going to, extol his virtues or say, oh, how he's, I don't want to whitewash his entire wall and present him as a hero. So I try to do this. I cannot be sure that I'm 100% successful, but it's always my endeavor to feature people who stand for something, who believe in something, who built their companies and their enterprises through the basic values of hard work, determination, passion, innovation, and whose life story can reflect these values, so that in a way, like Devdutt was saying, I mean, I sometimes think I'm doing Panchatantra Tales of Business, where I'm giving life lessons to young people through stories about things we all know, that look, you believe in yourself, you work hard, you can make any dream that you have come true. So thank you so much, Vaidhi, and I think...
Just one last question. As a cricket fan, I've always maintained that you can't teach somebody fast bowling. The person has to have the ability to bowl fast. You can't teach somebody to bowl at 140 kilometers per hour. If the person has the ability, then you can kind of refine it. This is how you hold the ball, this is how you swing the ball, this is the height at which you leave the ball. But natural ability of delivering 140 kilometers per hour has to be innate. Is writing that?
Yes and no, of course. As you said, you do have to have a natural inclination or some, talent way with words. But it is also like a lifelong practice and application of that talent. I mean, if you've read the book Outliers, you know that it takes 10,000 hours of passion and devotion in any field to become really successful at it, to stand out in it. And I think that is my story. I probably put in the 10,000 hours so that suddenly I, became a best-selling author. I think when people ask me, what should I do to be a writer, I just say you have to write. You have to write, you have to write, you have to write until you discover your own unique way of writing, which comes from you, which is genuine, which is not copied from anybody else, which could be inspired by a lot of different sources, but is genuinely you, so that it's your voice. Like how in music, Lata Mangeshkar has her own unique voice. Mohammad Rafi had his own voice. So a writer has to have his or her own voice, and you stand for, that is what you are, and you're expressing it, and then people connect with it. Sometimes it is commercially successful. It's not necessary that it be that way, but the writer continues to write for the joy and pleasure of writing. So thank you very much.
I've been speaking to young people around the country. I just want to tell you a story. 2 years ago, I'd almost failed the year, and I was going to be thrown out of my school. I was in the 10th standard. Today, I'm 19 years old, and I've published 2 non-fiction books. Now, because you worked with so many young people, I just want your thoughts. Because when I was in school, nobody appreciated the fact that I could write books and that I'm talented in something else. It's not academics and it's all right. And Howard Gardner did this research where he saw different kinds of intelligence. It's logical, it's visual, it's interpersonal, it's musical. But as a society, if we're focused on only telling us that one type of intelligence, for instance, logical intelligence is good, how are we going to get more people coming out and doing things like you're doing today? So how do you think?
Like you're doing too, right? I mean, each person who does it is then there for other people to look at and, believe that I can also do it. So it's wonderful what you're doing, and I'm glad to hear that you were able to bring out that talent in you, which maybe wasn't appreciated by others. I would just say that we can't look to other people to really validate us all the time. You know, it's not that when I started out on this road, my parents were like jumping up and down and saying, you're doing the right thing. It's just maybe 2-3 years back that my dad said, yeah, you're very right. What you did was right and it was correct. And I'm sorry that I wanted to make you do engineering, medicine, and so many other things. So I think you've got to believe in what you're doing. You've believed in it. And I'm sure there are many other people like you out there who are going to, just by living the life you're living, you're an example. And, you know, all your school friends know that you've done this. So little by little, the ripples spread. So I think it's all about having a dream. You had a dream and you made it come.
Thank you so much.